Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unleash Her. Hey, guys, I'm Roberta, and I am your host for the podcast today. And I am so grateful that you're here. And do me a favor before we get started, because I have an awesome guest here today. Just hold on. You are going to be so excited. But please go ahead and click subscribe. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to this channel. Please follow us and like this because the more engagement that we get, the most amazing guests that we can have on here, like Miss Jen Johnson, who we have today. Hi, Jen. How
Oh my
are
God.
you?
Roberta, I'm so good. How are you doing?
I am so good too. Oh, this is awesome. We are bright and early this morning and we are feeling good. I love this. Thank you so much for being on here. And I can't wait for everyone to hear your story. So let's get to this and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Jen Johnson. I'm an ER nurse out of Hamilton, Ontario. I've been an ER nurse for coming up 17 years, which is horrifically shocking. And most of my career has been ER. It's been a couple of different ERs through the years. Um, Trauma centers, pediatric emergencies, stroke centers, down to super rural emerges in Northwest Ontario, where it's just me in the ER and that's it. And then we call in the physician to be like, "Hey, can you come and see this person?" So it's been I've seen both ends of the spectrum. It's been so much fun. And, just working and thinking that everything's just going to be fine. You get married, you have the kids, you do all the things. And then COVID, and then 2020. And, if we weren't already stressed out, burnt out, running ragged beforehand, being pushed to the absolute complete brink of sanity. And I say that with all honesty. Um, when COVID first hit and everyone's like, oh, it'll be a week, it'll be 2 weeks, it'll be 4 weeks, it'll just, and that was right around my birthday with actually, that's this week. Is it's This is the anniversary of COVID this week, March. It's currently the 14th, but I associate it with the 17th, which is next week. And so that was my birthday. Like that was that week. So, trying to run around and figure out what was going on. And, my ER that we were working at this originally, we were seeing like 40 to 50 people in 24 hours. Not too crazy, pretty busy. We dropped down to seeing like 10, 15 in 24 hours. It was so surreal. Nobody was coming in. EMS wasn't coming in. Everybody was like looking around to being like, what do we do? We're fully staffed. Everybody showed up. Nobody picked up overtime. Nobody called in sick because you were saving your sick days because we didn't know if we would need them if we were intubated, if we got COVID. So we just stuck it out and everybody did their piece. You came in, you did your piece, you walked out. And that was it. And so truly that was bad enough, but at the time my kids were 4 and 5. And so no daycare, no school. I'm working full time. My husband's working full time. He's actually in infection control, which is so funny. So he's also working during COVID. And, you know, so he's Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. And I'm going, well, I guess I can just do straight nights. And so I'd be at home, staying up with the kids all day, maybe have a quick nap before going into work, and then be up for 12 hours, maybe get a nap, 2, 3 hours if we're lucky, and then be up all day with the kids, and then go back and stay up all night, and then go and stay up all day. So to say that like was completely broken is the absolute understatement of the year. Shouldn't have been nursing. Absolutely should not have been nursing. Was not mentally there enough to nurse. But, everybody was just showing up and doing what they needed to do and being there for who they needed to be. And it was just those moments where, you just trudge through. And there came a time where it got to the point of, daycares were finally opening up a little bit so I could finally breathe. I had actually switched to the recovery room because I didn't know, you know, in the ER, you could screen people all you wanted, but COVID tests were still taking 2 days to come back. So everybody coming in, cough, cold, fever, or then like vomiting, diarrhea. It was one of those things where the symptoms that got screened changed momently, like from morning to afternoon to night. There was a new policy. And so, if you weren't already frustrated with what was going on and what we were supposed to be asking or looking for, it continually changed, and it just kept us all so mixed up. Um, oh my gosh, Elise, gotta love kids. Oh,
It's
Lacey.
raw and real, guys.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh, clearly. I
I
can't
love
even.
it.
I love them, but it's just like I'm like, don't.
Hi. You're like,
Hi.
don't encourage, don't encourage.
No, seriously. And so it's one of those things
We
where
can-
it finally got to the point where, the kids were finally being taken care of. I was now working kind of a flip schedule where staggered shifts and all that, but I was barely catching up on my sleep. Marriage was struggling super hard. You know, Finally got on antidepressants, which I'd never been on antidepressants before, and truly should have been years ago. Um, but it just was this thing where, all of a sudden August comes around and I've got this need to, when COVID originally happened and everybody was coming forward with offers of gifts and food and services, it was so lovely to feel so supported. And then at the same time, like, oh, so we actually have to like almost, for that to happen. And then we had a bunch of attorneys come forward and they said, you know what, we appreciate you guys so much. We're going to offer to do your wills for free. And in March 2020, you go, so I get that you're probably wanting to make sure everybody's covered and in case of emergency, everything is covered. And I should understand that concept. But all I'm hearing is I'm not expected to survive. So, throw that into the mix of everything else. And it just was something that was weighing so heavily. And with the kids being so young, I thought, like how, if I were to either be in a coma or die, how do you explain to two young kids that mom chose to continue to go to work? And was thinking on it and was just all of a sudden, it was like in my head, you got to write down your stories. You got to write them down. So would stay up really, really late, would get up really, really early and would start writing some of the stories that really stuck with me through the years. And had a couple of good stories and I'm like, oh, this is great. Mom's a good nurse. And then all of a sudden, like the really traumatic stuff that I had absolutely not dealt with came bubbling up so fast that I couldn't even stop it. And so, writing about things that I'd pushed down and not talked about and not dealt with, like a pediatric patient that had come in that didn't make it, that was horrifically traumatic that I never dealt with. And just all these stories about, my bullying stories about being bullied and again, having that be my first introduction to nursing was just so awful. And so sitting there and, I blurt out all these stories and I'm sitting there, and Llewellyn, who's a metaphysical publisher in the US, they were having online book fairs. And so, tagged into one, and the one author that was talking about her book was Intuition at Work. And I just remember having this light bulb moment going, like, intuition at work. I use my intuition all the time at work. And I was just like, oh my God, that's it. And so went back to all my stories, went through, and I'm like, here's this thread of intuition that goes through every single story. And, did I believe it was intuition or did I not? Did I say anything? Did I not? And was I believed or wasn't I? And it was just this, thunderclap moment where I'm like, okay, this is it. This is what this all was for. And, again, August 2020 with the misinformation, disinformation, that was everything coming up. I thought, well, I would really be putting myself in the crosshairs if I put this out without any scientific evidence. Not to say that it couldn't be put out without, but I think it would be stronger with. And, how else do you get the scientific community to listen without science? So ended up looking into a bunch of different areas. So everywhere from psychology to metaphysics to pathophysiology and all these different areas. And not only is there just so much there's so much information on intuition, but so much information on intuition and nursing in general. And I'm going, okay, these are all peer-reviewed, evidence-based backed science papers that are all within 5 years, which is, the time frame that we're supposed to use. And so I'm like, okay, it's happening. I got to put this out. This is the science. And nursing school always said if it was science backed, despite what you may believe, you need to teach it and you need to put it out there. So that's what I did. And I put it all together and um yeah, put it out there for the world to see. It's finally been released, and that was just December. So I'm having such a good response to it. There's actually a hospital in the States that's a magnet hospital that I'd contacted, or we met at a conference that again I fell into. I don't even know how I got into that conference, but I fell into it. And they were like, "Oh, what do you sell in the book for?" I said, "Oh, 17.99." They're like, "Oh, if we can get it for less than 10, I think we could do 6,000 copies." I'm like, "Pardon?" I'm like, so the difference between that and then the exchange rate is like half my year's wage. I'm going, yeah, yeah, I think I could do I think I can do less than 10. Like I guess yeah, I think I can do that. So I'm like currently still in processing of that order and things are moving forward. Actually going to Boston at the end of the month for my 40th birthday and for the Nurses Association or the Association of Nurse Leaders conference, and I'm so excited for it. And everything's just really starting to take off. So, if you're ever looking for a sign to do something, let it be this.
Wow. Okay. That was awesome.
Thanks.
I'm just like, wait a minute. Well, first of all, we had two totally different experiences of 2020.
Yeah,
My job was furloughed. My job was taken away.
yeah.
I had time on my hands. I could sleep.
Oh my, tell me what it was like. Tell me the dream. We heard about all these people and you saw the little TikTok dance trends and you're just like, I wish we could do that. Like,
Oh my gosh.
you're like,
I
oh, I want to spend, a month with my parents and have them really, connect with my kids and like I want to stay home. Like I want to make bread from nothing and like a sourdough
oh,
starter and all these things.
but there is it's so funny because some people did enjoy their time off. Me, no.
You're too
Oh,
busy.
this got me fired up. I was like, oh no, this is not my life. This is not what and I'm sure everybody had the same thing. I'm not talking just me. I'm saying I looked at everything and saying, the way that I have been living, is this how I want to live my life? And so I'm grateful for, I don't even like saying COVID. I just don't like that word. So I know it is what it is. 2020, I just say 2020 was
20,
like,
wow, and truly that's all you need to say.
right? That's all we need to say. And I'm grateful for that because it woke me up. And so the time I started scrambling. I was like, all right, I found a mentor. We started planning what I was going to do when, I'm turning my life around. What have I always wanted to do? So this got me on that path.
Yeah.
Okay. But I had a lot of time on my hands and it was crazy. I took a lot of walks. I slept a lot. You're like, don't even.
No,
I slept
please
enough for both
tell
of
me.
us.
It's like there was once a joke about like a hotline that that parents could call and the parents would then talk to somebody who's like single and in their 20s and the person who's single in their 20s is just like describing their day like, yeah, I slept until noon, and they're like, yeah, tell me more. Yeah, we stayed up and we didn't have any plans and then we ended up at a party and they're like, oh my God, really? They're like, yeah, and then we went to another party. They're like, another party. Like it just was just so funny
Yeah.
because I would love to have that peppered into to remember, to skew my experience a little bit because the great pause. And that's what it was for a lot of people. And I mean, even in hospital, you want to talk about a pause. Like we were sitting around, like it almost was worse because we were sitting around and just waiting. You saw Wuhan fall, you saw Italy fall, we saw New York fall, and then we're like across the border from New York. We're 2 minutes from New York. And I'm going like, okay, like when's this gonna hit us? And it never it never got to that extreme, thank God. And it just was like, but it was just so, it was so terrifying watching it for everybody else and feeling for those nurses and those physicians and everybody who showed up to the hospital to do their jobs, even though it wasn't medical. I mean, the housekeepers going in and cleaning up and also being potentially exposed. Like that's not what they signed up for either. So it the change in perspective that it gave all of us was just something that was so refreshing. And again, gratitude 100% was totally the word. Because when we kind of started to open things up and we kind of relaxed a little bit and breathed, you're like, okay, like hopefully that's the worst of it, guys. Like,
Yeah.
we did
Wow.
okay. Like, let's move on.
Wow. The hardest part, because my parents both ended up in the hospital, and my mom was there for a few days, and not being able to be there with her was the worst
Yeah,
thing ever.
heartbreaking.
It was
What
so,
having people so and again, you want to talk intuition and ghost stories and this, that, and the other. I remember so during COVID when we still had visitor restrictions, so nobody could come in and visit. Walked in and patient wasn't even my patient, but I just had time. So we were just walking around, checking on everybody, making sure that everybody had all the hands and help that they needed. And ended up walking into this one room and emerge. And I look at her and I'm going, oh, she's got like 20 minutes before she dies. I'm like, okay. So I like gown up and everything. And I go and sit by her bed and hold her hand. And my I remember my physician popping his head. And he's like, "Oh, so do you want to do lab work and IV and blood work?" I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. She's got 20 minutes. Can you call the family? Let them know what's happening. We can try and figure out a FaceTime option if we had one. We didn't have any iPads or anything in the emerge at the time." But I'm like, I'll even sacrifice my own phone. Like, I'll just clean it really good afterwards. Like, if somebody wants to see or be there for it, but they couldn't get a hold of the daughters. And it was the first time that I was there with somebody watching them pass without any intervention. We weren't doing CPR, we weren't intubating, we weren't pushing medications. There wasn't six of us around this bed doing things with jobs. It was just me and her and sitting there. And I'd never seen somebody just pass. And to say that it's disconcerting is it really kind of shook me because I'm like, oh, okay, like that's the movies aren't that far off. Okay, like that's really interesting. And so she ends up passing, and I come out of the room and I degown everything, and I'm about to go into the back to cry. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't let out the soul. So, something that I've kind of developed over the years is when somebody dies and emerge after family's been in and everything's done and we're about to move them to the morgue, I'll go into the room when it's usually just me and them, and I'll say, Mr. or Mrs. So and so, I'm so sorry, but it was your time. But if you want to follow me, I can walk your soul outside, and then that way you're not stuck here, kind of thing. And you know, this started probably close to the beginning of COVID. I was already doing it before COVID, but not too far before. And so my charge nurse and people, like, they get used to me just kind of walking out randomly and just standing outside for a minute or two. And so, I'm in the midst of degowning and I go out or I walk to the back. I'm like, oh, I forgot to walk out the soul. So I go back up there and I open the door and I've got my mask on. I'm like, I'm sorry, Mrs. So and so. Like, it was your time. I'm so sorry that your daughters couldn't be here, but I'm so glad I was. And if you'll follow me, I'll just walk out your soul. And so the door to the ER to the outside was right there. So it was just a little scoot. And I walk out the door and like the tears are going. And I'm like, it's such a gloomy day and it's so overcast and the clouds are rolling in, and out of the corner of my ear, here's the most beautiful rainbow I have ever seen in my entire life. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, and we're all scrambling for just a little bit of joy at this point. So I run back inside. I'm like, guys, you gotta see this rainbow. So everybody runs outside, but it's already gone. So everybody filters back into the hospital. And I'm like, all right, that was for me. I understand. I got it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And continue to ball and then go back to work.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I just can't. And what you've experienced a lot. You were in there. Yeah,
In the thick of it.
you were. And then to take all of that, like I'm so proud of you. And I am. I think this is absolutely amazing. I'd love to hear people's stories. I haven't got to hear a lot of the in-depth stories like you
Yeah.
just shared, and I appreciate that. I really do.
If you want stories, come to a nurse. We've got the saying of, stranger than fiction is 100% true. I mean, the number of things where it's just, oh, so many stories. Like some of my favorites are so it's a night shift. It's almost midnight. We're talking about breaks. We're finally getting ourselves organized. The department's kind of settling down to a boiling point. We're like, okay, we've kind of got a handle on this. Let's talk about breaks. And I had already been into crystals and metaphysics and all that kind of stuff beforehand. And here's Will, who's a coworker of mine, and it's got to be 60 if he's a day. He's been in it for a long time. He's a nurse, was a paramedic before being a nurse, and then retired and then became a nurse. Crazy. And so he and I were starting to talk a lot about crystals, and he was kind of really getting into it. I'm like, oh my God, Will, like this is insane. And so he and I were talking because he'd started, bringing crystals to work because I was bringing crystals to work. And he goes like, "Oh, look at this. This is a citrine." Like, "Oh," I'm like, "Oh, all I know about citrine is like abundance and like, abundance. Like that's the whole thing." And as we're talking about it, through the ER door, this guy pries this ER door open and he like falls in and we're all like shocked because we're like, what the heck just happened? Like he's literally laying on the floor in front of us. We're like, what is going on? And we're like, okay. And so we're all like slowly starting to get up to see what the heck is going on. And then all of a sudden, two cops fall on top of him. I'm like, where did these cops come from? I'm like, okay, well, now we're moving a little bit faster because now the cops are involved. Well, then two more cops fall on top of the other two cops. And we're like, what is happening right now? And so we're looking at each other. We're looking at the cops. Here's this guy like having to, the four cops are trying to restrain this guy, and he's not a big guy. And we're like, what is going on? The one is trying to take out his taser, and I'm like, no, 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 don't do that. He's touching the old metal scale that we've got, the stand-up scale. I'm like, don't, no, no. He's touching the metal scale. Don't do that. Like, okay. And here's my doc who like casually pops his head out of one of the front rooms and he goes, Haldol and Ativan, and we're like 5 and 2. He's like, yeah, yeah, 5 and 2. So sedatives for a shot. I'm like, okay, so like somebody runs off to get the meds, and here's my doc. He just goes back to what he was doing, and you're like, okay, so give this guy the shots. He finally calms down, and we're trying to get him organized, and he's fine. So we're like, okay, this is all right. And I look at Will, and I'm like, so citrine brings an abundance of cops. Can we not with the citrine? There's no more citrine allowed in the department. Can we be clear about that? So now it's an ongoing joke between Will and I to say, he's like, you haven't got any citrine on you. I'm like, no, I don't have any citrine on me.
Yeah, we don't need that today.
We
Do
don't
not.
need that.
Yes, please. But okay, so talk to us about metaphysics and how the science behind
Yeah.
intuition. Please share that with us.
Yeah. So the science is so, so good. So, you're trying to learn about, what is it that cues us up that something's gone wrong. And if anybody is listening who is, more than a 12-year-old female, you know this feeling intimately already. You walk into a bar, there's a guy in the corner, and all of a sudden you're just like, creep factor or ick factor, or there's just something that immediately clues you off that guy is no good. I'm just gonna, nope, we're just gonna steer clear. That's intuition. 100%. That's intuition. That's you. That's yourself taking care of yourself, right? Like that's you watching out for you and trying to keep you out of potentially a really horrid situation. You have no idea who this guy was, but you just got an automatic, like, judgment almost on him, where you're just like, I'm just going to play it safe on that one. And maybe I don't introduce myself to the creepy guy in the corner. Fine. Everybody takes that at face value. Nobody questions that whatsoever. And it's something that we do constantly, especially as females. Not to say that men don't have this also, but women, just with the way the world is, this is what we do on a constant basis. We're always constantly just, assessing risk, truly, to ourselves, or others. And that's just something that we inherently do all the time without now realizing that we've done it for, 20, 30 plus years over here. So, you get used to that feeling and you just trust it implicitly. So when we take that and we take it into nursing, it looks like, I'm at triage, and originally I thought I was just playing a game where I was guessing what people were coming in with, or I was guessing if somebody was really sick or not sick, or super sick. And, trying to base it more on how I felt than the vital signs or the story or their past medical history. Not to say that I was totally discounting it, because absolutely not. That's 75% of what you're basing your story on. But then there's this 25% that, you're sitting there going like, I don't know about this. Like, there's something going on. I don't know if the person is not being totally truthful about the story. A lot of people come into Emerge, I like to say, are lying to me, whether they realize it or not. There's a lot of reasons why people come into Emerge that, they've taken illicit drugs, they don't want police involved, so they're not going to tell you they're on drugs, but can have all sorts of after effects with that. They're pregnant, but they're with their mother and and they're a teen and they don't want their mom to know that they're pregnant, so they're not disclosing that. So that's another big piece that you're missing. Or they're demented. They've got dementia, they've got Alzheimer's. They can't tell you what's going on because they don't know themselves. So you're still missing that big piece. So to always work under the assumption that I'm missing something keeps me from getting my behind handed to me on a daily basis. So to always think that you're missing something, it allows you to really tap into that piece of, what am I feeling about this? Am I feeling like there's more to the story? Am I feeling like a deep pit in my gut? Like, I just don't know. Is it just questions that pop into my head about stuff that I normally wouldn't ask about? Had a patient who was a pancreatic cancer patient, young, in his 30s, 40s, and it was 6 in the morning. We're talking, and he's just coming in because he's starting to have a little bit of pain. And so I do the triage assessment, we do the vitals, everything's fine. But before I realize what I'm doing, I'm asking him about, like, how are you coping? Like, how have you thought about your death? Have you thought about your funeral and what you'd want or not want? How's your family taking this? And it led into this conversation about, his wife is not ready to let him go. She's completely in denial about everything that's going to happen. Whereas he's very much a complete realist. He's already made sure all of his ducks are in a row. And we get talking. I'm like, well, there are death cafes that people who deal in death, those of us professionals who deal in death regularly, we can have open and honest conversations about what's happening and what's going on, and what do you think, without any sort of judgment, without it being a taboo subject. So, look up Google death cafes, and there's online, there's in person, they're all over the world. Just go so that you don't feel like you're alone, because you're absolutely not. And thank you, thank you, thank you, and going to that. And he mentioned that he's like, oh yeah, we're going on this like European cruise in a few months. And I said, oh, when are you going? He's like, oh, June, July. And I'm like, oh, maybe you want to go in March. And I think this was like February. I said, maybe you want to go in March. He's like, oh, do you not think I'll live? And I'm like, no, I just would rather, don't you want to be well enough to actually like enjoy the cruise and not have to worry about all these things? Like, I would go sooner rather than later. But then also in my head, I'm going, usually pancreatic cancer people are bed bound within 3 months. It's horrific disease. And so I'm like, no, just go earlier. And again, he's like, oh, thanks. And turtled off, and, got seen, and no problem. But why did that come up? Like that's never something I'd ask about at triage. Triage is supposed to be 5 minutes of just a brief story. Here's your vitals. Here's your history. See ya. Let me assign like an EIS score or a CTAS score to you, and you can then wait to see the doc kind of thing. But that came up. Well, why did that come up? And it's that the question was just out of my mouth before it happened, before I even thought about it. And then follow-up questions came out before I thought about them. And so I look back and I've got, my crew in behind me and they're all like tearing up. I'm like, "What?" They're like, "What did you just say to that guy?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What did I just say to that guy?" Like kind of spacing on what I'd even talked about. And so it's one of those things where, you kind of get like a little hit, and sometimes it'll be in your body where you're feeling heaviness in the stomach, or heaviness in the heart where you feel like you have to say something. A question pops into your mind where you're like, "Oh, that's kind of odd. Where did that come from?" I've had it where I've been walking down the hall and I've got patients lined up in the hall because welcome to Canadian healthcare, and my feet stop. And I'm stopped in front of this patient and I'm looking at them going, "Oh, you do not look good. Like, what is going on here? Like, I need more information." I was the charge nurse, and I'm like, "I need to know that this person's okay because they're out in the hall looking like they're not going to do well in the next, hour or two. So let's just make sure that they're fine, and we're not missing anything, and we continue to tee everybody up the best we can." But, it comes in different ways. The science, there's a little bit of different speaking to it, as in like, is it insight, is it experience, is it pattern recognition, is it spirit or god, potentially coming through and maybe giving you a little bit of a download. It could be everything. Why not? But in reality, when I speak to it, especially with healthcare professionals, it's more of, if the word intuition isn't going to be accepted, then use advocate. I'm just advocating for my patient. I feel like there's something going on. I need a physician to come and see and make sure that we're not missing anything. Let me just advocate for my patient. And that'll hit every single time.
Wow. You're so, I know we're saying intuition, and you're so in tune.
Oh yeah.
You're very in tune. So you're very aware. And a lot of people don't have, okay, we all have intuitive power. We all have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of us can see it more than others, but it just shows how in tune you are with yourself too, to recognize these things. That's amazing. That's a gift.
But it's taken years, right? Like I originally thought I was just playing a game at triage, and that was after 5 years of being a nurse. That, I look back, and there were instances in my first 5 years that yes, I did have intuition hits that I did follow up on. And again, just simply under the guise of, I don't know what's going on with this patient. I think they're really sick. And that's how I had framed it. I was kind of sloughed off at the time, but looking back, I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 that's what that was." But it's just being able to, it's two part, and honestly, it's that simple. To just realize that it's happening. That's all you that's the biggest hurdle, is just to realize that it's happening in that moment. We're so busy, we're always on our phones, we're walking around, we're busy doing stuff. We're always worrying about something because that's just the world we live in. And to be able to then go, "Oh, okay, well, why am I getting that feeling? Or why is my
Mhm.
heart heavier? Or why all of a sudden like I've got this weight on my shoulders? Like what is happening there?" And just kind of just take it one step back to go, "Hey, let me look at my situation that I'm in. Did I just get a really negative text? Did I just read some really horrific news? Am I at work and a coworker just mentioned a project? Am I nursing and my patient in front of me, just all of a sudden their color kind of soured a little bit? How is that working in your world?" And then the second part is, are you going to do anything about it? And how I like to relate it into nursing is, everybody wants to talk about resilience and burnout and self-care. Well, if you could actually prevent the scenarios that are causing those things in the very first place, that would be great. So if somebody could step in and realize that their intuition is saying, "Hey, this patient's really sick," you could assess that patient, um, talk to the doc, intervene, potentially stop a process that is, potentially life altering or life ending, and prevent, a really sad, horrific moment, not just for the patient, but for the nurse, because as nurses, there are patients we all carry around with us. I've got patients who 18 years ago, before I even was officially a nurse, I've got somebody from my fourth year who that family still, I carry that family with me. They're in the book. And they approve of the book, which is even bigger. Um, but we've all got those patients that we carry around with us that, it was a really tough thing. Your pediatrics, those are going to stay with you for an entire career. There's going to be situations that hit too close to home that you're like, oh no, that's not. Oh, okay, they're going to be with me. How many, you may have a family member in the hospital who passes, and it even might just be their time, and it's peaceful and dignified, and that there still may be a nurse crying over your loved one that you have no idea about. Like the number of people that I've cried over that I knew for all of 30 minutes and they were dead the whole time is a lot. So, if you're ever wondering about if somebody else is missing your person too, if they were in hospital, I can probably guarantee you that a nurse is missing them too.
Yeah. Oh, I think this is so amazing. And you're opening doors. You're opening so many doors. And for in the medical industry, whoa, you're just getting started, girl. You better catch up on your rest because this is awesome. What's the name of your book?
So, Nursing Intuition: How to Trust Your Gut, Save Your Sandy, and Survive Your Career. Available on Amazon. Just found it in Indigo, which is a huge deal, and Barnes and Nobles. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at ernurse.jen, Jenn. You can reach out to me at rx4growth, forgrowth.com is my website. And actually, I'm probably most active on LinkedIn, Jennifer Johnson, BSCNRN, because there's a ton of Jennifer Johnsons. Just your basic girl over here.
Oh, I think you're more than basic. Yeah, 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 we do. We know this. I mean, for what you have experienced, I'm impressed. I mean, it's taken me a long time. I got a few years on you, girl, and
No, you
you're
don't. You look
you
great.
well, thank you, but you are just getting started. I really believe I can my intuition right now. I know it. I can feel it that things
I'm hoping.
are yeah.
If I can just open the conversation to be a little bit less 3 a.m. and a little bit more nursing school and in the advocacy piece, I would be more than thrilled. It's not about selling books. It's not about getting away from the bedside because I'm still at the bedside. I'm still working my part-time job. People ask me if I'm going to leave bedside. I said, no, no, that's where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be there
Yeah.
part-time, but, but, but I'm supposed to be there. So
Okay, we really have a very similar story because I'm working in a hair salon too still. But and I think part of that is just I love that.
yeah,
I'm like, why am I still here? I have a book, I have a podcast, I have this, that, and I'm like, oh no, I'm supposed to be here, not just for many reasons.
yeah,
And so I love that. And gosh, we got to stay in touch. But I
we have
also
to.
want you to look up one of my mentors, Kathleen Cameron, and because
Okay.
she's in your up there in your
In the
Canadian
wilderness.
yes, in the wilderness, yes. And she was also a nurse and just completely turned her life around and is a huge, just lives her life intuitively
Yeah.
and it's so beautiful, and she's really just guided me on my journey, so I think you would really love, listening to her, so check
Love
her
it.
out, everybody.
Done.
And, you guys, I would love to hear your story too, so share with us, what your experience of 2020 was, because we had 2 totally different experiences here, didn't we?
That could be its own podcast. What were you doing in 2020?
Right? Exactly. So, oh, thank you for sharing everything with me and all of us today. This was so amazing. Is Is there anything else you want to share? I know you told us where to find you and your book. Any last words you want to share with us?
Just do it. Whatever you're thinking about doing, whatever weighs on your heart, whatever you feel called to do it. Just
Yeah.
don't worry about how scary it is. There's always time to learn. Just do it.
Yeah.
This is your sign officially.
I love it. I completely agree with her. Listen to Jen. She's got this. Okay, guys. Ah, thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here today. I appreciate you. I love hearing your story. And I'm so proud of you too.
Thank
I
you.
am. You're welcome. I love this. And thank you everyone for being here today. Check her out, check her book out, and stay tuned because we got some more good stuff coming your way. Thank you all for being here today. Remember, please like, subscribe, follow this so that we can share more stories like we did today with you. Thank you, everyone, and stay blessed. Have a great day, and we'll see you later.